go. Okay. Oh, shit. All right. Just set this up. Okay. All right. So we are live. Welcome to the live stream. This is Fresh Faces, New Ideas. My name is David. And if you like the content, if you like what we talk about, feel free to like and subscribe. And if you like what I say here, you can also follow me on Twitter at Faces Ideas, or you can listen to me on the Center Left Radio podcast when I go on that. So for this one, we're going to cover a couple things. We're going to go over the $15 minimum wage, whether or not it could actually have been in this bill, and what the implications of it not being in the bill are. We are going to go over just what's currently have happened with the Senate bill, with the COVID relief, where it stands so far. Currently, as we're speaking, they are they're debating it. So I do have on another screen the debate. So if something starts happening there while we're going live, we'll flip to that and see how that's going, and then we'll discuss what's going on there. We're also going to go over the George Floyd and Policing Act. So this was passed last night, I believe. It was passed Wednesday or Thursday. We're going to just go over it. We're going to go over what's in the act, what the proponents against it are saying, whether it's a good or a bad thing. So currently, I do have a list of where I got a lot of the information from. I put that into the video, so if you're interested in the same source that I have, it's the House Judiciary's bill. So it's just a very brief overview of what is in the bill, and it helps to break it down because these bills are long and there's a lot going on in them. So that's what we have there. So very quickly, first thing is $15 minimum wage. So because of what's in this bill, it has the $1.9 trillion earmarked. Like, it has it set aside. It knows, like, okay, this is what each thing is going to. So if you remove a piece of it because they want to be able to spend the $1.9 trillion, you're going to have extra money to play with if you remove bits and pieces of the bill. And that comes into a couple different parts. So for the $15 minimum wage, let's be very clear on this. If Joe Biden and Kamala Harris wanted the bill, the answer in the bill, like they said they did. Kamala Harris has said it many times. Joe Biden has said he wants it many times. They can overrule the parliamentarian. They can absolutely do that. The biggest hurdle appears to be Joe Manchin, and I think it's Kristen Sinema. It might be a different senator, but at least Joe Manchin is fighting against this, and that's why they're saying they have to take it out, or they've taken it out. But be very clear: if this bill, if they wanted it, the $15 minimum wage in the bill, it would be in the bill. It's simple as that. So for people saying, "Oh, but you would lose Joe Manchin," is implying that the Biden administration is under no ability to put pressure on a senator, which is part of why it's called the bully pulpit, is because you're able to bully the senators in order to do what you want. He's not able to bully one or two senators on a popular legislation, or they say, "Okay, Joe, you're going to be the one who thinks this this is the must-pass bill that is going to come across Joe Biden's desk, across anything that he passes." Obviously, there are pieces of legislation that are going to drastically change the country if they are passed, and they will help change the country in better ways if they are ultimately passed. But the current bill, the COVID bill, is like the most pass. It's very important that they get this done. So there are two ways that this could have happened. They could have said, okay, they're going to put the pressure on them, saying, what do we have to give you to get the $15 minimum wage? Do we need to do a carve out specifically for West Virginia to say that they get $11? Is that what you want, Joe? Because we'll do that for you. Because his argument is, well, we can live on $15 minimum wage in West Virginia, or at $11 minimum wage in West Virginia, so that's what it should be throughout the country. And that obviously that doesn't work for places like New York or California, or places where the cost of living is higher, because even $15 doesn't cover it in those places either. So that's one way they could do it, or one way they could do is close bluff. They say, okay, Joe, you're going to be the one who sinks this. And keep in mind, COVID bill. The more people know about the COVID bill, the more popular it becomes. The more people know about what's in the COVID bill, the more popular it becomes. So the more that people are told about this bill, the more they like it. So it's already incredibly popular. It has like 70% approval rating overall. It has like 60 in the 60s among Democrats, in the low 60s, high 50s among Republicans. Minimum wage has incredibly high polling. It polls very well. People love it. They want to have it. Even the people in West Virginia want to have a $15 minimum wage. So these are incredibly popular policies. So the Biden administration has a lot of leeway where they can say to Joe Manchin, say, okay, Joe, we're going to put this in the bill. You can kill the bill, and your constituents will know for a fact that you denied them all of this aid because you thought that they didn't deserve a living wage. It's as simple as that. So that's to be very clear of why what the bill could pertain and why $15 minimum wage. Like, Bernie's going to introduce an amendment. I know he was slated to do it at 12. I haven't seen any updates on that. And when I was watching, I've been having it up in the background for like the last hour. They've basically been milling around. So I don't know if they're discussing things or what is currently happening. So we may get information about this during the live stream. It might come out after. So I'll put more information about it as I know. So the other thing is, so that's it for $15. It's very. Oh, the other thing is how much money. So the earmarked for this $15 minimum wage is $68 billion. So that means by removing this provision, they have $68 billion in this that they've kind of earmarked for this bill that they can use elsewhere. So part of the problem is how they've decided to push this bill out now, is they've had a couple self-inflicted wounds, and some of it's been one of it's bad, one of it's like kind of okay. So one of them is to change who gets the funding. So they're going to cut it off for an individual making $75,000 to $80,000. So if you make $80,000, you will get no relief. And if you're a joint couple, if you make $160,000, you will get no relief. There's two problems with this. One, this is all earmarked. This is already means tested to their 2019 taxes. So let's say I made $80,000 in 2019, and then I lost my job, and I made zero this year. Because my taxes, unless I've already filed my taxes now, before this bill passes, I will get no relief. It is simple as that because of how they're earmarking. Originally in the House bill, it was if you made $100,000 individually and $200,000 as a couple, that's where the phase out would start. It would start at $75,000, and you would get less and less and less until you hit $100,000. In the current iteration of the bill, it's if you hit $75,000 and then once you get to $80,000, that's it. It's a much sharper cutoff. Doing this saves $12 billion. So you could include this stimulus. You could give this check to people with the $68 billion that you've already saved from cutting out the minimum wage, and you would still have $50 billion left to play with, $56 billion left to play with for other things. You could put it into to helping schools. You can put it into helping more teachers. You can put it into testing. You can put it into the states. You can put it anywhere. So cutting this doesn't make sense. So why is this a bad thing? Well, under this provision, 17 million Americans will not receive a check that received it under Donald Trump. 12 million adults and 5 million children. So let's just look at this as a hold on one second. As a purely political electoral issue. If you are going to say that, all right, so let's look at this 12 million people, because this is the people who are going to be ideally voting. So the 12 million people who will not have gotten this $1,400 under Joe Biden will have gotten it under Donald Trump. And there's a good chance they'll remember that for 2022 and 2024 if Joe Biden is running again. Also, this is now a campaign thing that should Donald Trump run in 2024, he can say, hey, look, I gave 17 million more people a check than Joe Biden did. just on a political standpoint, let's just look at this 17 million and see how much of an impact that has. So, as it is, it's something like only a third of Americans vote. So, or even we'll take the high scale of this. So in the last election, about 150 million Americans voted. That's about half of the total population of the country, and that was like incredibly high record turnout. It's like Joe Biden got the most amount of votes ever, and Donald Trump got the second most amount of votes ever for a presidential candidate. So it's very clear what those are. So from this, so we'll take the 12 million and we'll cut it in half. So there's 6 million voters. So that's about the margin. That's a little less than the margin of victory that Joe Biden had just in the popular vote. He won by about 7 to 8 million votes. If you look at where he actually won in the states that he won by about 40,000-ish votes around that area. So you're looking at 6 million people at minimum, or that's like the high end. The high end would be 6 million people who, if they're voters, based on the last election, will be already turned off from you because you did not give them a check that the other guy gave them. That's more than enough to swing an election. That's like 10 times more than the voting number needed. That's literally his popular vote margin. Basically, is it's 1 to 2 million. And we've as the people who were discussing things in the last election, we're talking even if you win by 1 to 2 million popular votes, which is something that's totally possible. We saw it, even Hillary Clinton won by 3 million votes. You can still lose in the Electoral College. So even if in the worst case scenario, this potential 6 million people who would not receive checks under Joe Biden decided, okay, we're all going to vote against them in 2016, he would have lost the election. Just it would have been a landslide election loss. Even if it wasn't like a landslide electoral loss. It's obviously, if they're in certain states, like more populous states, it wouldn't matter because of the population and the amount of electoral votes would be the same. But from a popular vote standpoint, it would be a massive. It would be a 12 million people swing. That's what they're looking at potentially in this worst case scenario, because there's no need for this. There's no need to cut the checks like this, because even as Janet Yellen said, there's no downside to going bigger. If you allow more people to get this check, and you allow for more people to have access to money in this economy, it would create a larger field, and it would help the economy. That's what every study shows, that the more people who have access to this money, the larger the economy will go. And that's a good thing. That's what we want. We want to have an economic rebound. The job numbers have been in and out. They haven't been great. I think we're still sitting at like 6.3% unemployment. I think I saw was this morning. So that's where we're looking at now. So having more people have money is just a good thing. It'll help them in the end. And even if so, let's say, because their argument is ultimately, well, we don't want people who make $300,000, $200,000 a year get this money. Then why are you cutting it? Even if that's your argument, which didn't make sense under the original set of the bill, why would you cut it at 80? Like even that thought process doesn't make any sense there. So, and even a simpler way to do this would be, you would put in the tax code for the filing in 2021 that if you made X amount of money in that year, and you did not make it in if you filed your 2020 taxes, and then you file your 2021 taxes, and you file that you made above, let's say for the sake of this, $80,000, and you received the income check, they would just tax you on it. So that's one of the ways they could do this. Instead of saying we're going to preventively cut this off now to potentially cause a threat of something that which let's be clear, there's absolutely been people who got the first round of stimulus who did not deserve it. Absolutely, Tom Brady's corporation used it. The Lakers got it. A whole lot of big companies got these help for like PPE loans and stuff that didn't qualify or shouldn't have qualified for it. So it would be much simpler to tax it on the back end than it would be to stop people from getting it now. So there's that. So ultimately, this doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form. And according to the reporting that just came out in another bill that came out a couple hours ago, is they're going to also cut the amount of unemployment. So in the first bill, the first CARES Act, it was $600 on top of whatever your regular state did. So that was really good. It was a very good bill. It helped a lot. There was a lot of studies that said like having that extra $600 was like a major thing, and it was good because a lot of other countries didn't do that. The other thing, the counter to that was other countries gave them more monthly or upfront anyway. So in this bill, it was sitting at $400, and that was supposed to expire in August. Originally, last night it was up to they moved it back to expire in June, which is a problem because that means that they would have to come back and potentially pass another bill in order to extend the unemployment benefits if they needed it. So now they've changed it. So now it's going to be an extra $300, but it goes until August. And the reasoning for this was, well, we're going to be in recess anyway, so it doesn't make sense for Americans to potentially lose out on this, and then us not having to be in the office to pass a bill in June. Or in July, to pass a bill in July and then come back in August when people have already been struggling for a month. That's part of what happened the last time the money ran out, is they were just sitting on it because they just kept going on break, so they couldn't do it. So is it good that they're cutting this down from 400 to 300? No, it's not good. Is it good they're extending it a month? Yes. But I think the really important thing they have to do is they have to, when they ultimately pass this bill, do it as a stabilizer. So they have to say these checks and stuff will go out until certain economic points are hit. So let's say we have to do until unemployment hits 3%. Right now it's about 6.3. So if you tied this bill to unemployment being at 3%, then they wouldn't have to keep coming back and passing this. The money would just keep going to the people who needed it or who qualified for it until unemployment hit a certain number. And this is part of the lessons that they had to learn from the 2009 stimulus bill. If you don't put stabilizers in it, you're going to have to keep coming back. And the more often, and as we've learned, even in this crisis, the more often you have to pass stimulus, the less of an appetite there is to do it. That's why the first one was so much bigger than all the other ones, partly because it was, just to bail out the corporations. That's what made it so bad. So that's one of the pushes there, is to have a stimulus bill that you can cover more people, and if you have it to the automatic stabilizers, it's more protected. It means more people will be able to have this money there and protected for them, so they don't have to worry about it coming back. And this is not going to be another bargaining chip to say, okay, well, we're not going to give you your stimulus money for whatever this is, which are for your unemployment stimulus, unless you give us our border wall or whatever the thing is, depending on how they pass it. Because if they can't do it through another reconciliation bill, they're going to need to do it as a compromise, and the compromise would require 60 votes. And in order to do that, that means that they can hold things hostage in order to get policies that you may not want passed. So having it set to things that are outside of Congress's immediate whims, like voting, would make sure that the American people would be able to be more protected, and would allow them to focus on other things. So where do we stand on this bill? It seems like a very big, self-inflicted wound to have to cut who ultimately gets the money, although there are other things that are positive. So yes, while technically 17 million people would get less direct checks from this bill, the expansion of the child tax credit, which is $3,000, would cover 26 million people. So there are people who would receive the tax credit who have not received anything in any type of tax credit for that in any of the other bills, which is a very good part of this. So it does kind of even out bits and pieces there. So the other thing for this bill is we have to see what ultimately comes out. So what is currently happening with the bill is when they started debate, so they called for a vote. 0 Republicans voted for it. So that then Kamala Harris had to break the tie, and then Ron Johnson called for the bill to be read in its entirety, and this took almost 12 hours. They started at like 3:30 Thursday night, and they ended at like 2 Friday morning. So the problem with this is two things. One, it's a disingenuous stall tactic, because that's exactly what the Republicans said. They said, we're going to drag this out as long as we can because we each have a ton of amendments that need debate and stuff, and that's how we're going to make sure that we draw this out, because we don't actually want to pass this bill. We just want to delay it, because they know that this bill is incredibly popular, but they have no appetite to pass it, because if they pass it, then it will help Joe Biden, and they don't want to do that. So they had them read out every part of this bill. It's like an 800-page bill, 600 to 800-page bill. It took them 11 hours to read this. The problem with that is they all left. Like, all the Republicans left, or the ones who were there were just not paying attention, which is just absurd. So they made these poor clerks read this bill, and then they just left them alone. And the worst thing is, this didn't even count as part of the time for debate. So they wasted 11 hours where they could have been debating amendments, whether it's the $15 minimum wage or whatever the other amendments would be, an expansion of the child tax credit, expansion of who gets the aid, whatever the Republicans are going to offer, then that would be fine. Like, even the first time this bill passed was the Republicans actually had some amendments that went into it. I know Joni Ernst, when the $15 minimum wage was in the bill, she pushed for an amendment saying that you couldn't hike it to $15 during COVID. And Bernie Sanders said, yeah, obviously, because she hadn't read the bill or was just being disingenuous. And he said, the bill, my proposal doesn't call for that. The $15 minimum wage hike is by 2025. So it would be a gradual increase. So he's like, yeah, we're going to put that in. Obviously, I don't care. And then they still didn't put it in. So they wasted 11 hours. They're going to do as much as they can to try to argue against this bill anyway. Now, so it's not clear whether this will be passed either tonight, Friday night, or whether it will be Saturday or possibly Sunday. So what would happen next is it has to go back to the House. So the House has to look through the bill, and they have to reconcile whatever they did. So obviously they're going to have to reconcile whether the $15 minimum wage is going to be in. It appears they're also going to have to reconcile who is able to who's going to qualify for the checks, and they're going to have to reconcile how much unemployment is. That's just those are just the headline pieces that are aware of. I'm sure there's a lot of other things in this bill, because it is a massive bill and it covers a whole lot of different topics. It is going to be clear what isn't, what's covered and what isn't. So there's that. So currently they're discussing it. And we'll see. I mean, we don't know what's going to come out of it. We don't know what amendments are going to come out of it. It is unfortunate that Joe Manchin has just proven that he has all of this power, and that the Joe Biden administration is not either doing horse trading or trying to twist his arm in order to get the things that they want, because there are other bills that they're going to need. There are things they're going to need Joe Manchin for. Most obviously is filibuster reform. I made a video about that yesterday. The different ways, because he's made it very clear that he will not abolish the filibuster. He will not do the nuclear option, which I laid out. His exact quotes were, "No, Jesus Christ, no. What do you not understand about no?" So they have to do either changing how the filibuster works by having people having a talking filibuster. Would they change it by change how the debate works, so that if you're doing you're debating a bill, the longer the debate goes, the shorter the threshold is, the less votes you need to create the threshold in order to break the filibuster. Would they, slice how the filibuster, what encompasses the filibuster, such as, putting statehood as a separate bill, putting healthcare as a separate bill, putting voting rights as a separate bill, things like that. So these are things now. So I hope that the Biden administration saying, look, Joe, we're going to give these things to you now, but when it comes to actually doing some type of reform so we can pass the rest of our agenda, which I'll talk about in a little bit, we're going to need you to back onto this. Otherwise, Joe Manchin is basically running the government, and we didn't vote for Joe Manchin, we voted for Joe Biden. And if Joe Manchin doesn't allow certain things to happen, then Joe Biden can't implement the things that are very definitely needed to fix this country. So, some of the bills that have been passed most recently are the Equality Act, which I covered a couple days ago, or possibly last week, which basically says transgender people can't be discriminated against for being transgender, or LGBTQ people can't be discriminated for that same reason. The other thing is the HR1, which I also covered. HR1 is the John Lewis Voting Rights Act, which would strengthen election laws. It would gerrymander things. It would make our democracy allow more people to vote. That's the goal of HR1. And then most recently is the George Floyd Act. I think it's I think it's like HR5. Is what the George Floyd Act, or maybe it's irrelevant which one it is. But it's the George Floyd and Justice and Policing Act. So I'm going to go over that in a little. So here's where we stand on the stimulus. $15 minimum wage appears to be most likely not in it. It does appear that they're going to cut who can ultimately receive the benefits. It seems that they're going to cut the unemployment, and they're going to allow for more for a further extension. Hopefully, they tie that to unemployment or other indicators to make the government work. And finally, they're going to just push for. They're just going through the other amendments now. That's currently what's happening. When ultimately this will go through the Senate is unclear, because it'll depend on how many amendments are being added, because they have to debate every amendment for a half hour. And I know it was either Mike Lee or Tommy Tuberville said they had like a dozen amendments, and then if all of them have that many amendments, it's going to take a long time. So that's where it is. It's kind of in limbo about how long it's going to take. But it is very clear that the longer this bill takes to get through to people, the more people are going to want it, because they're going to need it, and the worse it's going to look for the people who opposed it. So the pressure is on to make sure that the messaging is, this is a very important bill. This idea that we have to be bipartisan to reach out to them, and they've done nothing to. They've made very clear they will not help people. This is the Republicans. Like, there's polling and there's studies that show, if you take a group of people and say, okay, here's what's in the $1.9 trillion act, and here's what's in the $600 billion, which is the 10 Republicans act, and you compare them, people still want the $1.9 trillion, because it's a significantly bigger and better bill, and that's why it's more popular than the other one. So there's that. So let's go on to the George Floyd and Policing Act. So this was passed last year as well, but it obviously, like a lot of the things that the House passed, it died in the Grim Reaper Senate. So this, as it stands now, will probably also die in the Senate unless something is done by the filibuster. Let's be very clear. The George Floyd Act, HR1, the Voting Rights Act, the Equality Act will all die in the Senate if something is not done about the filibuster. It is indisputable that will happen. There will be no passing of the agenda unless they do another reconciliation bill, which I think, because of how this calendar works, he has another shot at the end of the year to do another reconciliation bill. And none of these things fall under a reconciliation bill, so he can't use that to pass them. So that's where it stands. So unless something is done by the filibuster, as awesome as some of these bills sound, it is irrelevant, because they will not be able to be passed with a 60-proof majority. It just won't happen. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go over the things in this bill, and then I'm going to go over the criticisms of it, or the arguments against it. And so I looked through a whole bunch of people they use the arguments. I'm going to ultimately use Marjorie Taylor Greene's Twitter feed, because she has a feed that covers a lot of the different stuff. It's very similar stuff to what Kevin McCarthy said. It's very similar stuff to what Madison Cawthorn said. It's basically the Republican talking points. That's why I'm going to use hers, because she has it laid out. And part of the thing is, because she's not on a committee, it is very easy for her to say things, because she's not really working, and all she basically does is try to adjourn Congress every day. So one of the big things in this bill is what it bans. So it bans chokeholds and no-knock warrants. So obviously the chokeholds, this is what killed Eric Gardner. It is similar to it also bans the knee on the neck from what killed George Floyd. It's things like that. So that's one of the things. Everyone can obviously say, okay, you shouldn't do this, although we have seen during the BLM protest and in other videos that these chokeholds and stuff continue to happen. So this would ban it. Then keep in mind, all of this is being done at a federal level. So precincts that are in state and local levels, their rules don't change because of this bill. They still have their own ability to say how their officers are going to be, how their officers are going to work. So this is a limited amount of impact that it can only have. It also it bans no-knock warrants in certain drug cases and in other cases. So no-knock warrants became a big issue because of the Breonna Taylor case. Depending on which argument the police were using to defend what happened. So there was an argument that they did knock, and that the boyfriend just fired off shots at them anyway, and then they went to court and got a no-knock warrant. So they were lying about that. So no-knock warrants are generally, the argument against them is, okay, well, you're going to cut away from no-knock warrants for people who could potentially get rid of the evidence before you get through. So I'm not going to go into a lot of what's going on with the no-knock warrants and whether the intricacies in this. If you really want to know more, John Oliver did a really, really good piece on this. It was last Sunday, so that was, what was the date of last Sunday? That was the 28th. So his episode on the 28th, if you have HBO, you can watch it. Otherwise, you can just Google YouTube John Oliver no-knock raids. So he goes into a good job of touching on the good and the bad of these raids and how we can help reform them. One of the key things just to argue against that is he makes a statement. Well, why are we breaking into houses to confiscate drugs that there's so little evidence of them that you can get rid of it by flushing it? Which is a good argument. Why are you potentially breaking into the wrong house and killing other people, or putting officers in danger for an amount of drugs that can be flushed down the toilet? And obviously this comes back to the war on drugs and the over-criminalization of drugs, because if you keep going after tiny amounts, you're just putting more and more people in danger over smaller amounts. It also changes the deadly force code. So it says requires deadly force to be used as a last resort, and it changes the standard to reasonable instead of it changes whatever the standard was from willing to reasonable. So it lessens what the use of force is, and it makes it more stricter. That's what it does. It makes it stricter for use of force and how what qualifies for deadly force and how officers use them. And this is good because there shouldn't be as many options for the police to use deadly force as quickly as possible. It should really be a last resort, whether they or somebody else is in danger. And this is part of what the bill does. It restricts that. So one of the other things it does is it limits the transfer of military-grade equipment to police officers. So part of what happened since the war in Iraq is this uptick in excess military equipment. So because our military spends so much money on all of this equipment, when they get older equipment, they then just resale it back to the police. This was a I think it was a bill under Obama. I don't remember who passed this bill, but it allowed our police to get the military weapons or weapons of war that they didn't need to have access to because the crime that they were dealing with wasn't equivalent to the amount of force and the amount of power that they now had for these different bills. So that's what we're so that's this curves back on them. So they don't need all this the RPG launchers. They don't need the battle tanks. They don't need the all the heavy military grade equipment that they had access to. They no longer need to have. It limits how much they can get to, which is good. Ultimately this will help, turn down the military industrial complex and churn down what the use of all these weapons in the streets when they're no longer, because some of these armored vehicles, when they're on the streets, they're just tearing up the concrete. They're just tearing up the streets because they're not designed. The concrete and the vehicles aren't designed to be in this type of environment. So they're just ripping things up as they go, and that creates more damage to our infrastructure, which is already pretty bad anyway. And I think at some point he's going to try to do an infrastructure bill. So we'll see about that. So what are the other things? It also requires federal use body cams. Federal officers have to use body cams, and if they don't have access to these, if the stations don't have access to body cams for every single officer, it gives them federal funding to get that, which is good because the more we can see, the more evidence that there is, and then this should be easier for the police officers. They say, look, here's my body cam, here's what happened. This subject, whatever, threatened me or threatened somebody else, so I had to respond in this way, or this happened and I had to respond in this way. If anything, it would actually make law enforcement's job easier, so they wouldn't have to be, it wouldn't be a he said, she said thing, or they wouldn't have to say, okay, well, this bystander video is not accurate of what happened. It didn't catch the whole, the whole engagement. It didn't cover everything that was going to happen. So we have this video, and the video, our video shows you exactly what happens. Furthermore, it also requires marked federal police vehicles to have dashboard cams, which is just another way of transparency. Because the goal of a lot of this bill is to make policing more transparent. This would allow for officers to have more safety in that when they're doing it. They're saying, okay, look, now I have this video to back me up of what happened. The dash cam will back me up what happened. For God forbid something happens to an officer, well, now we have the proof of it, and now we can go after that person, and they can use these body cams in other cases where they can use it as evidence for going against the different people that they're going against. So it's as simple as that. What else does it do? It ends qualified immunity. So what qualified immunity is, it says that law enforcement officials and certain and government officials have the ability to have immunity from civil cases as long as if they're violating somebody's rights, as long as they didn't do so willingly. So what it does is it ends qualified immunity. So it means civil cases, if like a police officer knowingly enters your home and does detains you and then detains you further or trashes your home, you can sue that officer because they broke your rights. You have the right for unwarranted search and seizure. You have the right to be free. And then this doesn't. So what this doesn't do, it doesn't create a hit list for officers, because you still have to prove it in court. This is still a civil case. What it does is it makes the threshold lower, so that if these things happen, because right now it is very difficult to bring a civil qualified immunity case. So basically, like an example that's used is if you get pulled over by an officer and they beat you within an inch of your life, unless that exact same thing has happened, qualified immunity will protect that officer from any civil cases. That's what they're trying to get rid of. Okay. And it gives so it amends federal criminal status to prosecute misconduct. Hold on. Gives Department of Justice. Okay, so it also creates the Department of Justice, the Civil Rights Division. It gives them subpoena power and more funds, grant, that they can look into problematic departments. So if let's say like for the Minnesota police, where George Floyd was killed, this officer, if they had a history of officers who had a lot of problems, or there was a lot of complaints against their officers, instead of having the actual Minnesota police investigate themselves, this would bring the Department of Justice, who is an unbiased third party. That's a goal, because if you have them, investigating themselves, more likely than not, they're not going to do it in a fair or proper way. And you also don't want to have the local prosecutors do it, because they're the ones who work with the police, and this creates tension in that job then. So this would have the Department of Justice as a third party come in and look at this and make a non-biased judgment in order to make sure that the departments are doing what they're supposed to, that they're following all the rules, and that these, whether or not, if they're having all these complaints against them, whether they're valid or that whether something needs to change within the department. It also creates a nationwide police misconduct registry, so that if an officer has been fired or suspended for use of violence or any other issue that they're been suspended for, they're not just just swept under the rug and then hired somewhere else to be protected by that, and then it's just we just shuffle divisions out. And we've seen this happen. Most notably, the officer that killed Tamir Rice had a whole list of problems, and he was rehired relatively quickly after what happened with him. So this would ultimately bring accountability to the police. It would say, okay, well, Officer X, Y, and Z has 15 complaints against him of misconduct or use of force that's too much, and therefore he was fired because of this. So now that we know that, and then it says, he was fired in this city, and then he goes to a different city, and he gets rehired there. This police officer and this precinct will know, okay, well, this guy has had these complaints against him in the past, and now we know that, and we're going to make sure that we keep an eye on him, or maybe we don't hire him in the first place because it appears that he is a danger to society. So that's what this does. It helps bring more accountability to the police. Let's see. This says that mandates state or local enforcements to report use of force desegregated by race, sex, disability, religion, age. So this is good. So basically, part of what I believe is the more data that you have for a certain topic, the better it is, because data is good. It gives you a wider, unbiased response to how things are, and you can use it to make educated decisions about how things work. So what this mandate would do is it allows them to get an aggregation of what use of force. Why are certain encounters creating more force? Is it based on race, ethnicity? Why is this particular area using more force? Why is this particular area using force? Is there an underlying thing based on this particular group that there's more force against? So that's part of that's a good thing. By having this, it means that there's more accountability, and it allows you to target your policing better. Let's say you have a certain area that's required a certain amount of force for a certain reason, or if it's based on a certain ethnicity or something. Well, then you go and look into that area. Say, okay, is the use of force being overly used because of the ethnicity or something, or is there an underlying problem? Is this a high poverty area? Is this a high drug area? How does this gives us more data so that we can make sure that the police are used more effectively and that the laws are better in order to protect more people and to protect the police. It also makes it a crime for felony law enforcement officers to engage in sexual activities with an individual who's under arrest, indentured, or in custody. So this is rampant sexual assault. I wouldn't say it's not rampant, but it's enough that this is clearly a problem where the people who are in custody are assaulted by officers, and it prohibits consent as a defense for prosecution. And the reason it does this is because there's such a power imbalance. It's similar to the argument that you can't sexually harass somebody because you're their boss, because that person who the boss is has such a power advantage over the person who is who they're sexually harassing. So they have this power disparity, and that gives them the ability to harass them in a way that they cannot really, they can't really say no to because of the power imbalance. And that's what this does. If anything, I don't understand how you argue against this, because it says, hey, sexual assault is bad when police officers do it, when anyone else does it. And this means that you can't use consent because maybe you forced that consent, especially if you're not using body cams or something else to back it up. So that's that. So now we're going to go look into some of the defense, the arguments against it, and then we're going to see what the arguments are. So we're going to pull up Marjorie Taylor Greene. Do I have a? Yeah, it's Marjorie Taylor Greene. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So here's Marjorie Taylor Greene's her Twitter feed, and then we're gonna just read this, and then we're gonna go against what she says. Actually, let's just see what the Senate. Okay, the Senate looks like they're not doing anything. So Marjorie Taylor Greene tweeted about this. This was Monday. Monday was the 5th. Or the 1st. Yeah, Monday. Okay. So she says, this week, Democrats will try to pass the George Floyd Justice Policing Act. We know what her argument is going to just go against America, bring lawlessness. It's against the police will bring lawlessness. She says facial profiling at every level of law enforcement be prohibited. Facial recognition means an automated process that analyzes biometric data for individuals from video footage to identify or assist to identify an individual. And then her argument is that if a man rapes a woman and she's on video surveillance, the police cannot use it. And that's not true. That's not how it works. So part of the problem with facial recognition software is it screws up a lot. Like it's pretty inaccurate. It doesn't allow. It's not as accurate as you hope. It would mix up, different races. It has a hard time with Asian, has a hard time with African American people, and this causes disparities in when they go after people. So what it does is it changes how facial profiling and facial recognition software works and what it entails. So it does not prohibit facial profiling. It changes what the standard is. You need more than just that. Let's see. So anti-police bill defines use of force as pointing a gun at somebody. So if someone is breaking the law, police cannot pull their gun and tell them to stop. This is not true. Like I said, it changes the way the use of force is defined. So it is not just pulling a gun on somebody. Or first off, if someone is breaking the law, you should not have to just immediately go to pulling your gun. That's a lot of what policing needs to be do is to de-escalate situations. So if I'm jaywalking or something similar to that, a gun shouldn't be required. That's not something that you should have to do. So it changes how the use of force is qualified, and that means that different. That means it basically forces the police to de-escalate before they just go immediately to their force. So this is wrong. She's wrong on this. So let's see what else. Takes qualified immunity. And then she says the Hate All Police bill also takes away qualified immunity for officers and would overhaul and national police misconduct registry would be created so officers who are fired for such discretions could not be hired by another police department. Democrats literally hate all police officers. By taking away qualified immunity, this declares open season on police so they can be sued by bloodthirsty racial justice attorneys and anyone who feels offended because they got caught breaking the law. Both of these are not true. So what I said is ending qualified immunity is a good thing because it's because of how it has been ruled. It is almost impossible to hold an officer accountable to qualified immunity as it is now. It just is. Like the example I used is pretty standard. Is unless there is a case exactly like it, it will not fall under. It will be protected by qualified immunity. Also, the national police misconduct thing is, like I said, why would you want to have officers who have multiple misconduct placements, and that's why they were fired, being just moved somewhere else? You wouldn't accept that anywhere else. If I had a worker who was accused of stealing over and over again, I wouldn't hire that person unless I didn't know that was a thing. Why would I want to hire somebody who has all these issues in the past just because they're a police officer? Just because you're a police officer doesn't, and you do something wrong, you should be held at a higher standard, not a lower standard. So it's not. She's just wrong here. All right, so let's see. This is her saying that you're racist if you're a cop. That's not true. Okay, then she's going into the statistics about how many people were killed by the police. So we're gonna go back to here. All right, so one of the things that this bill talks about is basically the whole point of the bill is to let law enforcement know, is to make sure that law enforcement is held more responsible for their job. Now, currently, law enforcement they absolutely look they have a hard job, and this would make it a little bit easier for them in some ways because having more cameras mean they have more accountability. So let's say something came out and a video came out from somebody else shooting a phone video that goes viral, and they say, okay, well, this looks really bad, but we have our own camera video that says this is not as bad as it looks, or there's other circumstances that weren't covered in this video. So that would protect them. Qualified immunity means that they just can't abuse the citizens. it would allow them to actually be held responsible, which is a good thing, because just because you're a police officer doesn't mean you get to abuse people. So there's good things in that. Forcing them, to have body cams, forcing them to have a national registry so you can actually hold police officers accountable for their actions is a good thing. Because look, the argument is it's only a few bad apples. But the problem is these bad apples get hired over and over again, and they just bounce from one precinct to another, or they're protected by the precinct anyway. So what this does is it allows them to actually punish the people who they claim are bad apples, and it makes the police look better overall. The whole thing is, if these really are the issues that, they're not big issues among the police force, there shouldn't be anything against this. Having a national registry to know which police officers are using force disproportionately is a good thing. It is good to know which officers are using force. Furthermore, the National Registry of Force Use is a good thing. So we have more data, so we can say, okay, well, why is this thing happening here? Let's figure out what is going on here, to make sure that it doesn't happen. It's not as bad, and then from there we'll be able to make sure that the American people have better laws, or they're better protected, or we can figure out why this is happening. So a lot of this bill is just to protect different people from the police, and it's to protect the police themselves. Having people know that they have more trust in the police will make them less jittery. It'll make the police less jittery as well, because if people know that the police are under surveillance from themselves and from the federal government, they're going to be less likely to think, okay, well, the police are going to mistreat me now, so I have to do something in advance. Or they're going to be less likely to have somebody filming it, in which case we've seen officers over and over again get angry about being filmed. So this would protect them from that. So overall, what have we discussed this hour? So the COVID bill is still under debate. We don't know when it's going to end. Is it better that less people are getting the money? No. Hopefully the House bill they can fight against that and put that back in. Is the unemployment being extended good? Yes. Is it being lessened good? No. Is the tax credits good? Yes. Is the $15 minimum wage not being in the bill good? No, it's not good. And unless they bring up a $15 minimum wage bill, I don't know when. That would be the fourth bill that the House had passed. That would have to be debated on, because it clearly, like I've said, the other bills, the George Floyd bill, H.R. 1, the Equality Act, it is irrelevant what is in them, because they will not be covered. They will not pass into law unless something is done about the filibuster. So hopefully the reason the Biden administration is allowing the Joe Manchin to control so much of this process is because they're twisting his arm to get some type of filibuster reform so they can pass other things in the future. That's the best, most charitable way to put this. Otherwise, they are failing at that massively, and they're allowing Joe Manchin to destroy their chances in 2022 and 2024. So the George Floyd Policing Act bill, like I've said, is it's good. It's a good thing. It's not destroying policing. It's not defunding the police. It actually gives them more funding in order to have more equipment for body cams and things like that. It gives them a federal oversight that they don't have to worry about. Because look, if the argument from the police is, if you're doing nothing wrong, then why don't you let us watch? So that's a good thing. We should be able to have data on who's using force and who's not using force and where the force is being used. So that's what it is. So I hope you all enjoyed this. That's all for this live stream. Once again, please like and subscribe. If you want to follow me on Twitter, it's @Twitter @FacesIdeas.